Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon session. We hope to keep you awake. This is the difficult time of the day. Our discussion this afternoon is called Lost in Transition. And this is going to be a rather interactive and not very premeditated act from our part. Because it's mostly about ourselves, so I think that you don't need too much preparation to talk about yourself and about what transitions we have undergone in the past years. On my right, very shortly, I'll let you introduce yourself with a little game. Priya, Reto, Johan, Daniel, and Olivier. So maybe just if you can introduce yourself very briefly, maybe by saying roughly how many years you have spent somewhere else, and what was your biggest challenge then? And then the next question will be, what is your biggest challenge after? If there is anything we can call the end of the transition. Who would like to start? So Priya, just briefly about...
This is,
yeah. Yes.
So I'm actually the odd one out here because I'm HR business partner. My name is Priya. I have worked and lived in and around Bern all my life. And I have spent, all in all, about a year abroad on sort of 2 or 3 assignments.
And your challenge?
It's actually not so much my challenge, it's more the challenges I see. It's the little things in daily life. Where to find milk, how to get a car, things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I've spent 10 years abroad, short time in Sri Lanka, 5.5 years in Nepal, long time ago, and in the past 4 years in Southern Africa, in Pretoria and Harare. Altogether, the biggest challenge I would say was to strike a kind of a balance between family life and professional ambitions, aspirations, and expectations.
Yeah, I'm Jochen. I'm heading the international relations of Mission 21, international mission and aid organization all over the world. Spending time somewhere else. I think referring to that question, I could say I'm not lost, but I'm sort of home in transition. I spent the last 10 or 12 years in Switzerland and the rest, but even that time I spent in so many other parts of the world as well. And I think for me, the theme of this afternoon is very fitting. The greatest challenge is to make the bridge again from the context where you've come from to where you stay now, and to somehow make a sensible connection.
Thank you. You have your mic.
I'm Olivier, and I spent my youth, my first 6 years in Central Africa with my parents, and my first job was living in the bush in the mountains of northern Cameroon. The challenge there for me at the time was to learn the local language that was an unwritten language. And on returning, my main challenge was to wear shoes. I'd been wearing sandals for 2 years. Yeah.
Thank you. So you've understood this is about finding oneself and finding one's place. Just my own transition started when I was born in Geneva from Swiss German-speaking parents. And this was quite, in the 50s, this was quite strange because we had Swiss German at home and French at school and English on the playground. And then it has been a series of adventures. So the thing about balance, yeah. So you've already mentioned the balance between private life, family life, professional aspirations. And again, what makes it, I see the lady this morning who asked whether you can marry, whether this, yes, there she is. whether this kind of job is compatible with married life. So, well, I'm married, but I must say I was not during some years when I was abroad. It is indeed difficult to combine. Do you want to start with revealing some of your private, let's say, strategies to overcome this gap between marriage, family life, and work life?
I left as a bachelor, and after 10 months I met a French girl of my age, and we developed a relationship. When my contract ended, she ended her contract 3 months later, and she joined me back in Brussels, Belgium, where I'm a national of. And we survived for 10 months together, and we split up after that.
I would say I was in the lucky position to go to Nepal with 3 daughters between 6 and 9 months. And I say lucky because through the schools and we made a lot of linkages and had friends outside the professional world, which I think was very, very enriching, and we still have friends there. My last assignment, I was by myself for 9 months in Harare, and there the links, the social or the opportunities are much less. So it's a big difference whether you go out as a bachelor, as you said, or as a family. And I can tell you at that time there were no fragile states, but we had 3 month night curfew and so on in Nepal. It worked.
Well, from my
Yes, I think it works. Just go on.
Okay. From my point of view, a longer time of service is more desirable. A longer time of service, from my point of view, is more desirable than a short term, because you need time to get acquainted to the context, to build up relationships, to get to know the culture, the organization you're working with, etc. And from that background, I think it makes sense to, if you want to go out, to go together with your partner or together with your family, not to stay too far apart, because otherwise the danger is great that you just develop different kinds of lifestyles and views on life. And in my experience, there's a great opportunity to experience a new context together, finding not only yourself, your own values, etc., but also your relationship, and is a way to discover also your marriage or your partnership new. It can be great fun for the children, especially when they are small. I imagine living in Africa or so, the children will never have a greater time than there, where they're always with friends and in a community like yours too. So it depends very much on the life phase you're in, really, I would say. And for us as an organization, that is also the greatest challenge, that when we are looking for people, especially for a longer term commitment, it's very important that to reflect right from the start, okay, what will be the role of both partners? So if the woman has a position in our organization, what will her partner, her husband or whatever do? What kind of chances are there to combine this kind of work with your further career development, with your family development? Everything someone has to fit in. And I don't know if I'm romanticizing, but it seems that nowadays to strike these kinds of balances seem to me to have become more challenging than it used to be in the past. Even more so, it's important that you give sufficient attention to that. So I think the question, can I get married, or how can I relate it to my family, to my partnership, whatever, is a very, very crucial one.
Olivier, do you want to add something about kids abroad, or?
No, I was just willing to build up on the sort of dual career that it is, which is also a challenge in your home country currently. Whose career will be determining where you live, where you go, who's raising the kids. It's becoming a choice, not a set path for many of us. And this is challenging and road to opportunities as well.
Priya?
Can I maybe add, so I don't have my own opportunities to talk about, but I receive a lot of people who come to Bern, which to a lot of people seems to be far out, completely rural. How do I get there? I don't even get a car if I work in Bern. So it's in a very different way. It's very foreign to them as well. And what I find is that if there is a couple coming in and the wife is, for example, working for us, the husband is not quite sure yet what he wants to do, it tends to become very difficult very quickly. If the wife comes, they have children, and the husband is okay, he's going to look after the kids, that's usually fine, at least for a few years. What I think is the best possibility is if you have a way of making yourself feel useful, in whatever way that is. It could be an online business, it could be getting involved in local community in some way or another. Those are the people who seem to be most settled when they come out of their own country.
Just this morning we heard from Lisa that the first of these forum took place in 1994, and many things have changed. I just would like to remind us how technology has changed this topic. Patricia Danzi, who for years was heading the Latin American department in the ICRC where I was working, once told me between 2003 and 2008 there was an average of 4 marriages between delegates and Colombian, mostly women, Colombians. After 2008, this fell to 1 per year. And she said, how strange. So there were 4 marriages every year and only 1 after 2008. And her hypothesis, the answer was Skype. So this technology changed completely. I know colleagues of mine who having lunch in they have lunch in Mexico City, and their father or their mother has dinner in Moscow with Skype. So yes, it's not the best thing, but when I had a distant relationship with my wife, who is Colombian, we spent a lot of money on phones and other gimmicks to get in touch. You mentioned, we're going very fast here because time is slow, but now we've spoken briefly about marriage. Now, coming back to kids, the term third culture kids, okay? We're talking about kids who are born of 2 parents of different or maybe the same nationality who live in a third country. Any comments on or experiences on third culture kids, or any pieces of advice? How can you, okay, I'm Swiss, my wife is Colombian, if we were working in Bangkok, so how to deal with our kids, send them to what kind of school, and what's the identity structure of these children? Do you have any, maybe Reto?
Yes. For me, the most important point, keyword would be enrichment. Our kids had the chance to go to an international school. They are today perfect bilingual, and they still have this opening, an open mind. Still, it's still there, and I attribute this also to that chance to go to an international school and living for more than 5 years in a different culture.
And sorry, if I just may ask your kids, I mean through you, if I ask your kids now, who are you in terms of nationality? What would they, or in terms of culture, what would they say?
Well, we have deliberately decided after this trip in Nepal, we are going to live for some time in Switzerland, because my wife had an uncle and he was an ambassador, and she always said, my cousins, they don't have any roots. So we took that decision and then lived for 15 years in Switzerland to give this opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, my experience later on, I developed another relationship to keep on with the other story, hopefully. And I'm a happy father of 3 kids. And I remember that living in Belgium, the kids were our ambassador to developing link in the new village we had settled. And I remember our adult daughter telling, you should be grateful to me because my little friends' parents are your new friends. So that happens in all parts of the world. I was in my own country at the time. So the roles of kids in developing roots and developing bonds with the local community is essential everywhere.
Maybe one more thing, and then I've seen somebody with a question over there.
I think I see some points of comparison with the parents' way of serving somewhere abroad. I think for the children can be a door opener for the parents to a new context. And what is very important in my experience is like when I go for service somewhere, that I have a good accompaniment, ways to reflect my experience, my intercultural experience also. That is also, I think, an important point of selecting the kind of organization you're going with. What kind of accompaniment will there be? And in my experience, the same goes for the children. In what way are they able to experience this third culture as an enrichment, as you underlined, or becomes a threat, or they develop kind of prejudices or whatever? It needs an open atmosphere at home. It needs also a sensitivity and a good accompaniment of the children, like an accompaniment of the parents, I think is also crucial for a good stay abroad.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to take the question of, and if you have some more questions, maybe we can just raise your hand so we can know a little bit what's coming.
Yeah, just a way to put that into perspective. I think it's probably not that necessary to go that far to actually feel that intercultural and open-minded, or have that intercultural experience, especially in Switzerland. Because myself, for example, I'm from Ticino, so I grew up at the border between Switzerland and Italy. I have both nationalities. And, well, honestly, also going from one speaking region to another, I feel like I moved abroad almost. Or my own experience, my own growing up experience is multicultural by itself, no? And then, yes, I also had the opportunity to live abroad, and of course, it's something different. But talking about identity, I think it's important to remember that not only going abroad and living in different countries can give us that sensation, that feeling that we don't only belong to one nation state limited identity, but it can also happen in our own country.
Thank you. Over there.
Thank you. Well, same thing what you were saying about the TC case, the third culture kid. I was also a third culture kid, and right after university, going for an internship at the SDC, they couldn't put me in when they asked the question, what is your mother tongue? I told them I had a mother tongue, a father tongue, and a brother tongue. And frankly, I was really disappointed about the SDC that they were not really inclusive when it comes to recruitment. On the other hand, talking in your discussion, you haven't. I may be going on a UN mission in Colombia, in a non-family duty station, and still I do not see how you are finding the balance of family and being married. Okay, we have Skype, but you still will be going to a non-family duty station, and concretely how you balance that, I don't see it. Thank you.
Sorry. Oh, there's lots of questions. There's a gentleman with a hat, and further to the corner. Maybe we'll take a few questions, and then meanwhile we're trying to look for inspiration to.
Yeah, my question is connected to what you were saying. Often we see that more people gain experience and they grow old, they're looking for more stable or easier posting, like Nepal, like Bosnia, like cool places. And then we end up in like really tough locations like Central African Republic or Chad or other tough location where experience would be an asset. And half the management, at least of the humanitarian system, is like very young people, because nobody wants to go there, and as long as you have kids, you don't want to send them in the middle of nowhere in Central African Republic. So how can we in HR management deal with that? Because then we're throwing young people into contexts that are really tough, with no experienced support, because experienced people seek to like run away from those contexts.
I wrote down the question. I don't know if we have an answer here, but we'll.
Yes, hello, thank you. I have a question. How many men do we have on the panel? How many women do we have here? We have 1 woman, 4 men. The only woman is from the private sector. The others, NGOs, public sector, etc. I'm also, I mean, first of all, and then in terms of generation, I mean, the majority of the people that are here are younger generation. And as you mentioned already, technology has changed a lot. The relationship we can have with our partner, of course, it definitely changes. But there is also a big change in society. Before, a lot of men were the leaders. Okay, I have a job abroad, and then the woman is following. But nowadays, the woman say, no, I have a job there. Would you like to follow me? So I think there is a big change also in that. And I think it's still not as easy as we can think that the man can follow the wife. I mean, it is happening more and more, hopefully, but it's still not as easy as it was before. I mean, I have a family experience that was the case. My mother followed my father abroad for 15 years, but I had another experience. I left in the field, and when I asked my partner to follow me, he said no. So, I mean, it's also issues that I want to raise. It's very personal, but still society also shows that there are conflict. And I think there are organizations that are also have increased the possibility that partners follows to find maybe a job. There are more and more services that are offered in that sense, because otherwise there would be an issue not to go in the field and getting married, having kids, and all these things. Thank you very much.
Just thank you for noticing that this is totally unbalanced panel. We've tried very hard, I can assure you, and I have testimonies. Yes,
I can make a try. Yeah.
No, but we tried very hard, and unfortunately, I mean, all the women we asked to come here were either busy in the field or working. So I'm sorry for that, because especially I see that. Roughly looking at the audience, the reverse proportion is there. And I was mentioning we have also, if people have been following an earlier panel here about education, there is currently going a certificate of advanced studies called Internationale Zusammenarbeit with the ZHAW, the Zürcher Hochschule für Angewandte Wissenschaft, and 12 people registered for the course. 1 man. Okay, so that was just to answer this part. But you're right. There's probably still societal change needed before. Maybe Priya, you know more about this than we do.
No, I completely agree with you, and we can also see the shift from slowly a few women actually being prepared to come, or their partners being prepared to accompany them. But it is a very slow change. But I think there's also a role that all the organizations have to play, and it's not private sector or public sector, it doesn't matter. I think there are a lot of companies that have worldwide presence in various ways, and there is definitely an opportunity there to work together much better and to find opportunities so that couples or even families can find a way to make that move, and for both of the partners to find something for them to do that is valuable to them and to the society on a whole.
Thank you. So 2 more questions over there. Yeah,
Yes.
we haven't heard the gentleman.
It's more a question for Oliver, which is I just came back from Central Africa, and I also had the same experience as you, that I was with my girlfriend for the time I was there, and because of technology we could Skype every day, blah blah blah. But I think for me, which was difficult, is the comeback. So I don't know if you have any advice about that, because it's actually when you realize that you have completely different lives, and then when you come back, when you actually realize, okay, we don't match anymore, we have a problem. So that was why just before, when you said that you were a long time with your girlfriend and then after you broke up, I think for me, we don't have to neglect the part where you come back to your roots. Yeah?
Thank you for the question, and it bridges the gap with the other question also, that do you live for work or do you work to live? And the couple tends to be sometimes seen as a sort of honeymoon cradle, or is it a place where you solve together problems that you would not have alone? So if you look at the transformative aspect, both of the love relationship and of the expatriation experience, then you can bring that into the relationship and take it aboard, and not make it just a disadvantage of your split up life.
Thank you.
So I would like to take the same question further,
Okay.
directed at Mr. Nissan. In terms of trauma, when you come back from a war zone and you come back to normal daily life, how do you deal with the trauma, with the stress?
Hopefully you don't wait to before coming back to address that. You and your organization has developed plans to mitigate the risk and limited your exposure to that. And you might still come back with something like trauma or just a transformation of based from the experience. And I would suggest that you meet with alumni, people that have gone through similar experience, or you do go for some counseling, and in some cases you might even go into some therapy or talking groups. There are different ways. But hopefully, and that's the duty, and I will refer to the other question on young professionals in Central African Republic. That's the duty of organization, to have enough maturity in their team and to build in the protective mechanism at all levels, at the organizational level, at the relational level, and at the individual levels. Many of us had no clue. When I get back to the organization I was in, there was hardly any coverage just on the safety aspect, not to speak about the security. So that was back 30 years ago, but still we see that most cases are safety-based because we are partying and we have been drinking, and then those things may affect your ability to keep on working where you are. So there is a lot there, and rightfully you mentioned the young age and the limited experience that we may have, or the limited experience that organizations have to take it seriously, what it is to work abroad and be exposed to risks that are less known to us.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on these aspects of, coming back after some incident or yeah? No? Maybe we take one more question and then we'll try to...
Sorry, it's not really a question. I just would like to answer your question,
Okay.
because I have been living in Cameroon for the last 4 years, and I'm just about coming back, and I have been there with my family and with my youngest daughter. And I can assure you that about 40% of the expats, there was the wife who was working and the husband who was following her. So I think it's really a big change that you can see during the last years, and it's fascinating and it's great.
Thank you for these encouraging statistics. You want this?
Yeah, just one, I feel still urged to underline what I said before, that to me and for us as an organization, it is important to reflect these kind of the network of relationships close or further relationships very, very closely before even deciding to go out. But I think the experience shows that whether it's the man or the woman who follows, nowadays it is important for both that they feel, like you also stressed very nicely, that they have they make sense of where they are. They don't feel, oh, I'm just here because I followed you. But I'm here because it makes sense for me too. And so to look for other ways of employment or other ways to develop your career or to other make sense in life, I think to me or to us as an organization is very important. And it's very important also to look at that. And then the other issue also, I think, when you're exposed to a different cultural context, the longer you stay away, the more difficult it is to come back, not only to your old context, but also to your old relationship. So that is also our experience is the longer you go, the more it makes really sense to go together. And in that sense, also to look for ways how you can accommodate your partnership in your work.
Thank you. Rita.
Just to complement, you also have to look at from the side of the recipient country. As an example, on my assignment in South Africa, as I went with a diplomatic passport, my wife did not get any work permit. So this is one point you have to take into consideration when you go out as a couple or as a family.
Thank you. Just maybe developing on this idea of coming home, right? We still are optimistic enough to consider that there is such a place as home. I mean, for many people it might not, or there might be two. But what kind of preventive measures do your organization take to soften the re-entry shock? I mean, what can you give for advice, or what kind of mechanisms do you have institutionally, or what can you give as an advice for people who do this on their own?
So what we found is that we basically run exactly the same process as an expatriation for a repatriation. So it will not be the same amount. So for example, language training will not play a role, obviously, but there will still be some cultural catch up. There are some, within the company itself, there are some groups that have done this before and get together, sort of welcoming back. So again, the idea of exchanging information with people who've gone before you, who've had the experience before you. And we also make sure they go back for 2-3 weeks, come back once more, so to really close off, to understand what do I want to close off in Switzerland before I go back home, and then to be ready to relieve. And I think that it's not solved all the problems by no means, but it has softened the come back home phenomenon a lot.
Thank you. Do we have anything similar in the non-private sector?
We are not paying enough attention to that. For at least the mobile staff, the so-called expatriates, going back home is too much seen as going back to a safe haven. So it's a blessing. And we are just learning, and I want to put additional efforts into the adjustment phase. A year ago, I was in a sort of similar role to accommodate our colleagues that were leaving Sana'a, Yemen, to come back out of that war-torn country. And it was pretty difficult to negotiate that it would be spending at least 36 hours in Djibouti, just nearby, to rest a little bit, to meet like-minded people, colleagues, before rushing home. There is too much tendency that home will be good. And I remember, in fact, the time when I was in Africa with my parents, we were sometimes traveling back by boat. And, the 3 weeks on the boat would make a difference to accommodate. So somehow I would be an objector to flying back home, but, paddling back home, giving some time to adjust. And I've developed some metaphorical images, like scuba divers that do...
Palier de décompression.
Yeah, they have stopovers to go back to the normal pressure, atmospheric pressure. And we are pretty naive in my organization at least, and we need to advocate for that.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, there is no specific program for returnees in SDC, but personally I never had the feeling I would like to have it or that I felt it necessary for me.
Well, we have a very different experience and also a different practice. In our experience, coming back or traveling somewhere is often connected with excitement of the new, and it's usually or often much easier to go out than to come back, and it takes usually also a longer time to come back than to even where you have been. If you were out for 1 year, you might need 2 or 3 years to really come back, if you've been there really properly. And that is why, for us, coming back starts already before you even leave. Before you even leave, you reflect, or we reflect with the people we send out, we reflect, okay, so how is it going to be where you are? Why do you go where you want to go? What does it mean for you when you will come back? What does it mean for your relationships, for your own identity, for your professional life, for your family life, etc., etc.? And then the coming back is also prepared during the time of accompaniment, during the time of your stay abroad. For us, accompaniment is very important to guide you through different cultural phases you're going through, and to prepare your mind and also your setting, your structure, your life structure, everything before you come back. And then when you actually come back, we also have an accompaniment after you return, in the sense that you described. We have peer groups with other people who have gone through similar experience, because when I meet my old friends, it might be exciting for them to hear it for one night, all the adventures I've gone through, but then the second night becomes boring, and then we change the subject. But it's important to meet with other people who have undergone a similar experience, and to have a peer group, have exchange, and to have that exchange in an informal manner, but also exchange under professional guidance. To us, that is very important, and it's part of the standards of our international cooperation.
Yes, there's a question. And
yes, thank you. People are different, and people have different expiration dates. So I was wondering, in development aid and humanitarian aid, some people, they stick to it the whole life. Others, they change after a couple of years for different reasons. Some because they become cynical and then don't see anymore the sense of the work they're doing. Others for family reasons. Others because maybe they have been traumatized. So could you give us some examples of reorientation that you know, or from your own experience? What do these people do afterwards, and how do they reintegrate into normal Swiss or Western life after having been in Djibouti for a couple of years?
The thing is that the employment market is still at the middle age, and is still thinking in terms of function. So if you have been an engineer in water and sanitation, they will say, we have no such position here in Switzerland. And I think you need to be smart and to be based what the next step for recruitment market would be, to be skill based, so that you sell a new package of skills. And you can resell your skills to many places, provided that you have made an analysis of what you have been developing, what you have been using. At times you need, or either your organization will help you with that, or a counselor, a work counselor or a placement counselor can help you make an analysis of what are your abilities and what sort of package do you want to make of it. Because what's your project also? You possibly have had a project, or were you just selling your manpower over there? And so you make chances. And my experience, I've been, among others, an anthropologist in Cameroon, and later I converted into a management consultant. And I felt that the discussion I had under a mango tree with the old senior members of the community, and the conversation on business process reorganization I had in some sophisticated companies in my country were pretty similar. We had cup of tea and nice tables, we were drinking beer on the shadow of a tree, but you know, the type of conversation, the difficulty of finding the good reasons of why you were doing things. Well, the people that had degrees in economics, they said, we have been doing that for years, just like, you know, the senior people in African bush. So you make chances of converting easily to different jobs, provided you can use your skills.
I'm glad you mentioned this point, because indeed, you've talked about intercultural skills, there's project management. Maybe not the pure technical skills, but there's a lot of stuff we have learned out there which can be used here. And if just thinking about migration, I mean refugees, migrants, people to work with this population could, in my view, extremely well benefit from skills they have inherited from their years abroad. 2 seconds of publicity. Sinfo also has, it also part of our mandate, yes, to help people to take stock of what they have acquired abroad and how to use it. I mean, this is one of the, this is my personal dream of closing the circle. So it's indeed easier to leave. You have the excitement, but then probably having a good plan to come back and knowing where to use these skills can be an extremely helpful way to reintegrate before it's too late. I mean, before you have gone totally bamboo or whatever. Yes, Reto?
I may be a bad example, but when I left for my assignment, I was sure I was not going to stay with SDC, but I would return back to the non-for-profit organization I worked there. And in these 5.5 years, that organization stopped working, didn't work anymore, and I got an offer from SDC to stay, which I took happily. But for the rest of my career in SDC, I always had, for me it was very important to think, in case it doesn't work, I could work as a consultant. So it was not just going one way, but having an option. And I think this is, at least for me, was hugely important.
Yes, Priya?
I can speak from my own experience here. So the reason I am in the private sector, and I am actually with a big American company, which is something I never envisaged myself in, is exactly that. I do not have the Swiss HR diploma, because I was first a teacher and came in sideways, and I wanted to become something in HR. And the problem with the Swiss companies was that they were looking for that diploma, and without the diploma you don't get in. So my choice was HR first, company second. So I decided to take that step with something which was not really in my heart, go into the private sector, go into a big corporation where I can learn everything about HR, because they have all the functions that an HR function can have. And now I'm thinking about how can I get the sheet that I need in Switzerland in order to move out of that sector again. So I think you need to be really creative about how you think about your career, and as always, you have to sort of decide on what are you prepared to give up, and where do you insist that you want to stay.
Thank you. My watch says 2:15. Is that negotiable? Where's the timetable? Let's assume. Sorry? Slightly negotiable. Okay. So if it's slightly... okay, maybe one or two last questions, because we don't... Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah. So perhaps I just a few encouraging words for the young professionals here about joining the partner or about being joined by the partner. I'm still a young professional myself. I did a UN youth volunteer year in Nepal in 2014, where I got to know Sri Lankan partner who was working for the same organization. And even before I finished my UN Youth Volunteer year, he got a new assignment in Rwanda. So in my last RNR, Rest and Recreation, in Nepal, I went to Rwanda to visit him, and this was a bit of a question of whether I could, again meet the representative from the same organization for which we were working, or whether I start submitting blind applications. So I submitted a blind application with another UN agency, and it was really about just calling the receptionist, and the receptionist putting me through to the chief of mission. I met the chief of mission, and I had a job basically 1 month later. So this was a very successful encouraging moment also for not just our relationship, but also for our career, for both of us. Only 1.5 years. So on the one hand, I had to give up to work with my most preferred UN agency, but on the other hand, I gained huge experience in another one. And then 1.5 years later, he again got a new appointment, and but this time an internal position in Tanzania. And we always said we will support the person who gets an internal position first, which in this scenario was him. Now it happens it's just 5 kilometers, no, not 5 kilometers, but 5 hours away from where I'm working, the two countries being neighboring ones. And for the visa, I went to the embassy and asked whether they could give me a multi-entry visa, and they said no. And then I explained my situation, and then they said, okay, please explain your situation in a letter, and we will reconsider. And I received a multi-entry visa, which allows me even to visit him every weekend. So it's, and also there is a new partner policy, which has been issued about 2014, where also organizations are now more bound to consider partners for appointments, where it has become more and more easy to consider consultancies for partners, and we saw it twice happening with our colleagues. So lots of movements into, let me say, the positive direction going on.
Thank you. So I think we have to clear the scene here. If you want, well, probably we have some rest areas over there, so you can catch up with anybody of us if you need some additional inspiring, or if you want to inspire us, most welcome. Thank you very much.